That's the situation in Mali. It's been confirmed by the UN mission there that one UN employee has been killed in what is suspected to be an Islamist militant attack on a hotel. This in central Mali. As we say, UN mission sources confirming the death. Soldiers surrounded a hotel in Mali that had been stormed by suspected jihadists. Defense Ministry sources say this happened in the town of Sevare, which is in the center of the country. Now, eyewitnesses say that several people were killed, including soldiers and Islamic extremists. This in the attack on the Hotel Byblos. It's believed gunmen are holding there now as many as 10 hostages. The premises, of course, used and frequented by UN staff. Now, this is the latest in a string of attacks this year by extremists in central and southern parts of Mali. 3 years ago, they controlled the entire northern Azawad region. Well, let's get some analysis of the situation. Ohayon is the CEO and president of Africa Consulting Group. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you feel this could be the start of a more violent period in Mali?
I think we definitely are going to see a lot more violence. What we've seen even from the start of this year is that the jihadists have been able to push into central Mali and even more southern than that on the border with Ivory Coast and the border with Mauritania. And this doesn't bode well for the security forces just in general. More than that, we're seeing them being a lot more brazen. They've learned to carry out some smaller attacks, more targeted against regional leaders and things of that sort. But more than that, we've also seen them target military bases and even involve militants from across the border. So we've seen Ivorians come in and actually carry out the attacks with them. And this is something a bit unusual, but this is also something that really is gonna probably cause more of a regionalization of the conflict.
There is already, of course, that situation continuing in Sevare. Let's point that out here and now. Hostages apparently being held there. In terms of what happens next, though, 3 years ago, the Islamist threat in the north of Mali was seemingly eradicated, pushed away or pushed back into the mountains by the French intervention. There is a feeling now, though, that perhaps that problem was moved rather than solved.
I agree with that, actually. I think that what happened was that mostly, and I think that in terms of the response from the French, in terms of adopting the Barkhane operation, was a direct response to them acknowledging the fact that the Serval operation in the beginning, what it did was just push away the militants across the borders, more towards Libya, more towards maybe northern Niger. And the response has to be regional because the problem is a regional problem. And I think that that's what we're seeing. We've been seeing more of a resurgence. We've been seeing also that security forces have been extremely busy with the intra-rebel and separatist rebel issue up until they signed on June 20th the peace agreement. And in that time, what we saw a lot of smaller attacks and then pushing into the center without really having anybody fight back against them. And that's one of the main problems here, is that the security forces are not capable of really dealing with the problem. And that's where the reliance on the French and the reliance on the UN comes in.
You mentioned a regional or regionalization of the conflict. And that clearly brings to mind for our viewers, I imagine, the name Boko Haram. Yes, do you see a link up there?
I think that maybe the approach is going to be similar. What we've seen so far already in terms of a response from the Ivory Coast, namely, and also from Mauritania, was an increase in security on their borders. But also in kind of looking into their own society and realizing that some of the people that have been tied to these attacks that have happened in southern Mali, for example, have been Ivorian. And this was a bit of a shock for Ivory Coast, I think. There has been talk that there is going to be a meeting between the countries in order to be able to maybe do a regional military response, such as the one that we see with Chad, Niger, Cameroon, Benin against Boko Haram. I don't know if it's necessarily at that stage yet. And I think that at the moment, the need here is to build the Malian security forces. And one of the interesting things about today's hostage situation is that the Malian forces are actually taking the first position against what is happening at the moment. So they're trying to help them out, to make them get the experience, but at the same time, this is going to cause some backlash against the government, that there's a possibility for these militants to be in this specific town that is very, very strategic.
Battle Ohayon of the Africa Consulting Group, thank you very much for sharing your time with us here on France 24. We do appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.